which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This is our third and final legislative talk this season. We have both our representatives, Holt and Senator Jason Schultz here. This has been sponsored by the Logan Kiwanis Club and the Chamber of Commerce. So while you were out talking, Jason, they decided you could start. You could kick it off this time.
You've all been to those church meetings in a small town. The biggest risk of not going to the meeting is you're going to end up with something new to do. So, okay, I'm going to make sure. I just realized I didn't make this quiet. So I better go like that. I'm really better at there. Well, welcome everybody. Fantastic to see another great crowd. Looking forward to another good conversation for the hour. The Senate has been busy. We've been continuing to move good legislation, things that are going to make Iowa a better place and set us up for a more successful future. During this time, since we've met last, some challenges have been laid on our table, and the number one challenge is that revenue estimating conference. I think Steve has the numbers a little better than I do because I prepared for some policy, and I'm sure you do too. I'll let them visit with on that a little bit because that's legislative, that's the whole state. But we've been dealing with things this week. Voter ID came out, it was out of the House, came over to the Senate. We spent Thursday afternoon debating voter ID. I think it's a very good idea to make sure that the same person who registers to vote is the same person who shows up to vote. Iowans seem to agree with that very much. The bill that we have is Paul Pate's bill. As Secretary of State came out. It's a little more complicated than I guess I was hoping it would be, but it's made it through the chambers. I think we have to bounce it back. We have a technical amendment there, not so much, but we have one amendment on there that'll have to go back through. I guess I'm hoping, I don't think there's going to be any trouble with it, and then we'll send that on down to the governor. Looking forward to having that done. That's something we've kind of worked on for years. The bill doesn't keep anybody from voting, but it does ensure that if you are a legitimate registered voter, that your vote won't be canceled out by somebody who's looking to cheat. And I think that's good policy, and I think that's good for Iowa. We passed a fireworks bill this year. That has been in the works for years. I can't understand why it was this difficult, but the senators and representatives in the urban areas are among those who have been resisting this. The fireworks bill is about as watered down as you could possibly get, and yet still have access to fireworks. So I'm hoping we can expand this a little bit, just in the name of freedom and liberty a little bit. But what it does is it creates windows during which you can sell and then ignite fireworks. I think free Americans should be able to buy them and burn them off when you want to. Like I said, this is what it took to get it through and actually reintroduce the idea that Iowans can have access to fireworks. My newsletter, I wrote two newsletters this week. One of them's coming out Monday, so I'm not sure if it's this one or Monday's. But other states don't have a problem with this. Iowa's not going to have a problem with this. And the idea that currently, Iowans can possess fireworks, so you can have a ton of gunpowder in your basement. And it is totally legal, a ton of fireworks, but for some reason you can't discharge them, and that just seems a little bit silly. We're all familiar with the private fireworks displays that go on around, you see them from hilltop to hilltop as you're going around. Obviously, a lot of Iowans are going around this anyway, so there's no need making a criminal out of an honest man. I mean, let's go ahead and do this. We got that done. For locally here, our schools, I'm really glad that we got a transportation equity bill through. And this is, I think, the newsletter that came out here just yesterday. I'm going to round the numbers here just for simplicity, but the state aid is about $6,500, per student we send out to our schools. Out of that money comes the money to go out, pick up a child in rural Iowa, and bring them to the front door of the school, and from there the money that's left is what goes to educate the child. Well, school districts in Iowa range from 2 square miles, and imagine that out here in rural Iowa, just a school district of 2 square miles, West Burlington, compared to the upcoming school district of Maple Valley, Anthon Odo, and they're about to join with Charter Oak Ute. Over almost 400 square miles. Now imagine taking out of your $6,500 the amount of money that it takes to cover 400 square miles, gather up all those children, and get them back to the front door of the school. The money that's left over is now what you get to use to educate that child. Well, Senate Republicans for a few years now have been working on trying to get a formula. We've been working with Iowa School Board Association, and we've come up with a 10-year plan, because you just can't throw money at a problem. We're working this in because we do have some budget issues, but we also want to address the fact that rural children should have the same amount of money available at the front door as a child in West Burlington, in Des Moines. The numbers range from a little over $1,000 per student to get them to the front door to, I think it's down to $81 in one of our metros actually doing it. Now, the formula takes into account that school districts cannot bloat their numbers, they can't increase their numbers to look like they need more money. It actually takes a 90%, that 90% is in the formula, or what they report, trying to equalize, because they also, schools are responsible for these tax dollars. They need to be accountable for them and use them efficiently. I mean, we're not looking for them to just come up with ways to spend more dollars to increase the weighting that they get. So that's in the formula also. With that, I'd like to I bet we're gonna have a robust question and answer, so I'm gonna stop and we move to Steve and Matt, and otherwise, I'm done, I can't wait to hear the questions.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's great to be here today with you. A couple things I would just cover that the House has worked on in the last couple of weeks and passed and sent over to the Senate. We passed some criminal justice reform legislation I think was very important. One of the things we had found out is that there are different types of cocaine, and there were different penalties for depending on the type of cocaine that a person was convicted of having or possessing, and it was causing a disparity in that African Americans who use a particular type of cocaine more than the other and were ending up in prison longer than folks that were using the other type of cocaine, which doesn't make sense because both the cocaines, create the same situation. So this legislation would even those out so that the penalty is the same across the board, so that we don't have a minority population spending more time in prison than somebody that's not a minority just because of the type of cocaine they use. This reform also strengthened the law as pertaining to somebody that tries to kill a police officer. So right now, if somebody is convicted of attempted murder of a law enforcement officer, they can still get time off for good behavior. This legislation would remove that, so somebody that's convicted of attempted murder of a law enforcement officer has to serve their entire sentence. They will not get time off for good behavior. Again, as we see more and more of our law enforcement officers targeted, we think that's an important thing to do. We also passed House File 573, which is home rule for school districts. So currently, the schools in Iowa operate under what's called Dillon's Law, which means their powers are expressly granted by the state. So home rule is just the opposite of that. It would allow schools to exercise flexibility in all areas that are not addressed in state law. So this is again giving local control to our school districts. You couple that with what we passed last week, which was House File 564 and 565, which creates a lot more flexibility in how our school districts can use funding. If you're familiar with these categoricals, or sometimes called silos, on how the schools can use the money, we're trying to give more flexibility to our school districts in how they use available funds and how they manage their school districts, because school districts are different depending in where they are in Iowa. So we believe that local control works best. We believe that the more we return control to our local school boards, our local school districts, and our teachers in the classroom, the better our education is going to be. We need to remind ourselves that we put a man on the moon in 1969. There was no federal Department of Education. And the more the government has gotten involved with whatever the flavor of the month is and trying to force it on our schools, the more ground we seem to lose in education. So we are moving in many ways as we can to return control to our local school boards and our superintendents and our teachers. Along with that, we are also funding K-12 education as our top priority, and let me explain why that is. We have seen a $251.4 million reduction in the revenue estimate since we set the budget last year. So we set the budget based on the revenue estimate. That's what we're lawfully required to set the budget on. We set it at 99% of that so that there'd be a little bit of money left over. Unfortunately, they missed the revenue estimate by $251.4 million. Last week, when they came out with their latest estimate, they lowered it by over $100 million. So we had already de-appropriated over $100 million. Now we've got to come up with another $100 million with only a couple of months left in the fiscal year. So the way that I believe we're going to do that is we're going to use the reserve fund. That's what it's for. We're going to use the reserve fund, and then we're going to put that money back in 18 and 19 because we have to. So we'll keep the budget balanced. We will use the reserve fund because otherwise, to cut $100 million with 4 months left in the fiscal year, we would literally have to be shutting down parts of the building. And so we're going to use that reserve fund, I believe, and then we'll put that back in 18 and 19. They also reduced the revenue estimate for fiscal year 18 by almost $200 million. So what that means is we're going to have some very tight budgets, and we're going to have to make some very hard decisions on priorities for Iowa. But through all of that, we did not reduce funding for K through 12 education. We did not reduce it for fiscal year 17. We've already committed to a $40 million increase for fiscal year 18, which while that's not as much as we would like to do, everybody else in state government is going to be taking cuts because we've got to come up with, we've got to replace the money that we take out of the reserve fund, and we've got to, with the $40 million that we're committing to K through 12 education. I think we're looking at $6 million was the figure, I believe, for fiscal year 18. We're going to have $6 million above what was available for fiscal year 17, which, the built-ins alone for Medicaid are going to be way more than that. So we're just going to have to look for the smartest ways we can to identify the priorities of Iowa and meet those priorities, but we will balance the budget because that's what we do. So that's some of the things we're dealing with over the last 2 weeks, and with that, I'll turn it over to Representative Windschitl.
I appreciate everybody coming out. I know it makes it a little bit easier when it's rainy and wet outside to come down here on a Saturday morning, but I do appreciate the
Go ahead.
This is actually probably one of the biggest crowds I've seen in Logan in the 11 years I've been here. So thank you for being here this morning. These gentlemen covered a lot of topics and covered them very well, so I won't rehash those. There have been a lot of big things that have happened over the past few months in the State House. We have taken on a lot of big issues, and I think that we are trying to meet the expectations that voters had when they elected us in November. They wanted us to take on some big challenges, and we've tried to address those things. There are some things that we would like to have done bigger or better, but it's the art of the possible for Thunder Morning. It's the art of trying to find 51 votes in the House and 26 votes in the Senate. I think at the end of the session, though, we're going to look back on this and be proud of what we've done for Iowans and what we've done for you, our constituents. There's a lot of work ahead of us. Steve highlighted the budget. Folks, this is not going to be easy. We're literally going to have to cut other areas of government to make sure that Medicaid is funded and to keep the commitment of $40 million new dollars into education that we already appropriated earlier. That means we're cutting other areas of government. That means we're shrinking other pots of money that may be going to the troopers or to corrections officers, to healthcare. There's a lot of other areas where we're going to have to shrink the programs and services that we're currently providing in order to keep that $40 million commitment to education. It's not going to be easy. And so I'm sure over the next month, you're probably going to see things in the news where House Republicans or Senate Republicans are having to cut this area of the budget, or they're going to lay off a worker here or a worker there. There's just no more money. And I think the biggest problem that we've had to face is that we grew government too fast, too quick, and we spent too much money. And when I say we, it is a collective we. The Senate Democrats, over the past 6 years, always took us right up to the line. They said, let's spend every last dollar the state has in projected revenue. For us to be able to get out of session and to accomplish what you sent us down there to accomplish, they drug us up to that line, and we had to agree to that. And I'll be honest with you, I think the executive branch could have been a little bit more helpful in trying to keep us below that line. Unfortunately, that's where we're at. Revenue didn't come in as it was projected to. And so we have some tough decisions in front of us, and we're going to have to try and shrink the size of government, which I think is a good thing. And I think right now is a prime opportunity for us to be able to tighten the belt, look at duplications in services, look at where government grew too fast, too quick, where it's inefficient, where there's duplications in services, and now is the time for us that we can make those hard decisions. Because as Steve said, for the next fiscal year, they're projecting $6 million of extra money. $6 million. What we've typically been used to is 150 million, 200 million. That's the amount of growth we've typically seen. We're looking at $6 million in new revenue. We've already committed $40 million into education, additional dollars. It brings us up to 648 or 680 some million dollars increases to education over the past 6, now 7 years. We've got Medicaid, and we have to fund it. We can't not fund it. We've got people out there that need those services. Clint can probably tell you a whole bunch of stories from the folks that he works with. We can't not fund some of those things. So now is our opportunity to shrink the size of government and to make it work better and more efficient for you. There's a lot of other things I'm sure we're going to cover here today. I don't want to belabor the point on the budget. I just want you to understand there are some tough decisions ahead, and I'm sure I'm probably going to hear from a lot of you in email or phone calls over the next month saying, hey, why are you doing this? Folks, this is our job that we have to do. There's no more new money. We're going to have some tough decisions. So with that, I know there's questions out there. I know Tom's got a question. I know Linda's got a question. So by all means, folks, you're here today. Let's hear from you. Clint.
Hey, you know, the essential function of government is to provide just the necessities, public safety, infrastructure, things along that line, education, supporting healthcare as needed, Medicaid, Medicare. A few years back, we rolled back commercial property taxes, which, you know, is a good thing when you're taxing commercial property at 100%. It's pretty tough to bring business into the state and keep business that is here. And I probably guess where I'm going with this, along with on backfill. So cities and counties work right along with that. That we can only assess that amount for our property taxes, so that left a difference in our taxes. So the state had offered a backfill to cities each year. And I understand, hopefully after this point, it's still safe for the current fiscal year. Well, the cities and counties were required by law to have our budget for the next fiscal year certified by March 15th. And we went around, I know there's several councilmen here as well from Missouri Valley, to do we include that rollback in our budget or not? And we chose to put that in our budget. That's about $70,000, that backfill. And there's been comments across the state from your peers, you know, cities, counties, they aren't pushing down their levy rates. Well, I can stand here before you, Missouri Valley lowered their levy rate just under 52 cents this next fiscal year. So we're doing what we're supposed to do with our tax dollars, we're being responsible. So I just ask that you carry forth with that rollback, or that backfill into the next fiscal year.
Okay, I'll address that. Right now, where we're at, there are a lot of tax credits out there, some refundable, some not. The rollback is part of that discussion, what we did for cities and counties with the property tax rollback in 2013. The simple answer is everything is on the table for the coming fiscal year, and that includes the rollback. We have to look at every area where we are spending money, and sometimes those tax credits are spending money. Now, there's arguments out there that we've had to provide some of those incentives in order to bring the job creators to the state of Iowa. And some of that is absolutely legitimate and valid, because we do have a very high corporate income tax rate that is not competitive with other states. And so, because we were not able to roll that back in previous sessions, we've had to provide other areas of opportunity for those job creators to come in and provide the economic growth that we desperately need, especially in rural Iowa. But as we look forward and as we look at this next budget, we're going to have to take into account everything, every dollar the state spends, not just in the services that we provide to the individual citizens, but also in some of those incentives or those tax breaks that are out there for everybody. So the rollback is on the table and it is in question. I'm just going to shoot straight with you, because I always have.
I would say I don't think fiscal year 17 is in jeopardy. I
No.
think we discussed that. I think that will
So
be
this
touched.
current fiscal year, we're saying,
You
Yeah,
should
because
be
we're gonna
for
take,
FY17.
I think we're gonna take that from the surplus fund, because it's just too late in the year to try to cut at this point. But I agree, everything's gotta be on the table. It has to be.
Have we overestimated our ability to fund programs in the past for the state of Iowa? And the second part of this is, if that's the case, then you have to start cutting programs. And I know there's gonna be such a thing as our 5% shortfall, we will have to cut 5% across the board. And the other thing is, if we could increase exports, could we cover these shortfalls? I bet there's a lot of programs out there that are kind of questionable as far as their validity. That's all.
I would say that we're not looking at across-the-board cuts. We are trying to manage the budget and make appropriations where we know we've got incoming revenue to cover the current costs of what's happening. So we're not looking at across-the-board cuts. That's something the executive branch would have to do, or potentially would do, if we end up in a shortfall outside of the legislative session. As far as increasing exports or things of that, I don't think that necessarily we're looking at trying to increase revenue to cover the excess in spending that the legislature has been enacting. I think that we're looking at trying to tighten the state budget and use the tax dollars that we have, not trying to take more tax dollars out of people's pocket. So,
And I would just, to follow up to that, we're spending $7 billion a year in Iowa. And that's a $2 billion growth over about, what, 6 or 7 year period?
A little over that.
Maybe 10 years, we've grown government by $2 billion. Part of that is because, you know, there are more demands as a result of the Affordable Care Act, the expansion of Medicaid, all these sorts of things are requiring, well, we're spending almost $2 billion in Medicaid now when it was, and we have 1 in every 5 Iowans on the Medicaid program now compared to 1 in 11 in 2002. So there's some of these things we can't walk back from, depending on what the federal government's gonna do with health care and all those sorts of issues. We have to pay those. But again, I would agree with what I think the premise of your question was, which is that we don't have a revenue problem, we have a spending problem, and that's what we have to try to figure out.
Hey, lady?
Yes, hi. I'm Eileen Saylor from Denison, and I thank Harrison County for letting me come to your legislative topic this morning. First, I applaud you for your efforts to cut spending. I think that's the way to go too. So whatever you lay out there, I'm behind you, especially on the tax credits. But really why I'm here this morning, I want to talk to you about House File 403. I've had quite a bit of conversation with Steve Holt on it, and I'm sure a lot of people are not familiar with it. But basically, in a nutshell, I'm going to tell you that the Iowa Hospital Association has proposed that the people who volunteer in public institutions, that their names be kept confidential. And this came about because at Crawford County Memorial Hospital, there was a citizen that asked for the list of volunteer drivers. And he asked for that list to confirm whether there was a sex offender driving the van for the hospital. And it was a big hoopty-doo. It went to court, and then it went to the IPIB board, and the IPIB board ruled that the hospital had to give the list of volunteer names. Now comes, because of that, I believe, the Iowa Hospital Association is heavy behind this, and some other volunteer groups, to keep the names of volunteers in public institutions confidential. Unless this amendment says you can go ask, and the public institution will determine whether you have a good enough reason to ask or not. Now, I'm telling you, that costs a lot of money, to ask and fight to get that name. But more than that, I am so worried that our public institutions, who do have a lot of volunteer workers, unpaid employees, maybe they get a meal or something, but they're not employees, they're volunteers, who like to prey on children, who like to take advantage of elderly. Once they know their schedule for PT, 3 days a week, they know what day their house is empty. And I'm saying the public ought to have a right to know in public institutions who the volunteers are who are providing services. The opposite side's argument is that publicizing the name of volunteers has a chilling effect on volunteerism. Now, I've gone to the literature to look and see if that's true. I find nothing. I find exactly the opposite. Publicizing the names of volunteers makes more people want to volunteer. So I think the argument they've laid out is not good. And the other thing that really bugs me about this, I'm a citizen without a big organization to back me. And I've done a lot of work trying to get the legislature to listen to me on this issue. But the Iowa Hospital Association is powerful, and they do fund a lot of the campaigns, and I'm not accusing anybody of saying they're buying their vote, but I did have one legislator tell me, yes, it influences my vote. They gave me $7,500 last year. So I'm asking you, yeah, $7,500.
He never gave me 7,500.
I didn't know
I didn't know they gave me that large of amounts.
It's just the point I'm trying to make. the bigger lobbying groups get the ear of our legislators to make decisions more than a common citizen. That's why I've come here. I'm hoping that a group from Harrison County will back me, talk to the legislators and say, this is nonsense. We have budget issues to deal with, we have clean water issues to deal with, and we're worried about volunteers list being public or not public. I think it's very wrong, and I thank you for your time. I'd like to know your feelings on it. Maybe, because I said, if you can give me the names of 50 volunteers that have come and said, I don't want my name publicized, I might listen to that. I want to hear why. But nobody has done that. It is not a volunteer who's complaining. It is a retaliatory move, quite honestly, from the CEO at Crawford County Hospital and had the big Iowa Hospital Association take this on.
I have had great conversations with you, and I appreciate the information you provided to me. I was not even aware, because I had not been following that story on the volunteer, but I was not even aware of his background until some folks emailed me about that, so I appreciate that information. The only thing that I can say right now is that there are several amendments that may be offered to the bill or may not be offered to the bill. I spoke with Representative Kester at the end of the day Thursday to talk to him about where this bill was. It appears that it is still moving and may come to the floor. But we do have, you have to bear in mind, we do have the United Way of Iowa, which is Iowa's largest volunteer organization, saying that they need this legislation or they're going to have trouble with volunteers. We also have several volunteer associations in Iowa, who are some of the biggest volunteer associations in Iowa, saying they're going to have, that it's going to have a, as you said, chilling effect on volunteers. So I agree that I do not believe I can support this legislation if it does not allow the names to be made public.
That's
Now,
all
the
people are
additional
asking.
things that I was looking for is that I don't think there's any need for phone numbers or
No.
addresses or anything of those kinds to be
Nobody's
made
asking
public.
for that.
Right.
And the other thing I want to tell you is just, let me tell you what a chilling effect it has for parents of kids. I do worry about human trafficking a lot. It's so easy to grab a kid and, take him into that situation. But the other thing that really bothers me, let's say a school says, any parents want to help volunteer, take our kids to the circus today in Sioux City. If the parents of the other children say, well, who's the chaperones on this trip? Guess what? The school district can't tell who the volunteers are. They can tell who the teachers are, because they're paid employees. But they will not be allowed to tell who the volunteers are. That is wrong.
So we're going to see what happens with this bill, what kind of amendments come forward, what it's going to look like at the end.
I know
So
one
that
amendment
process
is already put there, and it's just nothing.
Yeah, there's several others being considered. I haven't seen them yet, but I share your concern and basically agree with you that I think at least the name should be allowed to be made public.
Okay, thank you.
Is the issue the names or the criminal background? Is there a means of checking volunteers' criminal background?
Well, there's supposed to
and
be.
keeping things
Yeah,
private?
yeah, there should be criminal background checks done by any organization that may have, volunteers, the Iowa Hospital Association or whoever. So that would not be part of this legislation.
There is
This-
a legal requirement.
Yeah, this strictly deals with, changing current law to make it where those names would not be available to the public. Yeah, and I believe that is accurate in the
Well, I think-
Iowa Hospital Association.
I think that's
behind
right.
it.
Most people would want to know really who is volunteering for them. And yes, they're pretty good about doing background checks. Certain places have to do it to follow the law of background checks. Some places don't. And they don't do the background checks. It takes some effort to do that. But in this current situation that I described to you at Crawford County Hospital was a sexual predator. And I am telling you, the long-lasting damage to young people from what he did is still with them today, and they're adults. It happened over 10 years ago, and his record was expunged. So doing a background check didn't do any good there. But the people in Denison knew. And they did not want him around their children. And that man has been banned from the swimming pool forever. What did he do when he drove the van first time? He drives patients to the hospital to get their physical therapy at the pool. And he got to hang out there. Well, the pool wouldn't stand for it. They called the hospital and they said, he cannot be on this grounds. So they did honor their request that way. But I can't believe he still gets to have access to the public like he does, but, you know, that, all I'm asking for, just the names. Don't have to do any social security number, phone number, address, nothing. I think that would be our responsibility to go after it if we needed to. That's all I'm asking.
That's a good one, I promise.
It's always good with you, Scott.
You'll see, you'll thank me. The question of the day, when you're talking about budgets, you know, everybody here works on a budget, whether it's either at work or it's at home and everything else. When we're talking, you guys were talking about budget shortfalls, you know, what is the cause of these budget shortfalls? Somebody, at some point in time, you've had numbers to work with when you're figuring out your budget, you know, this is what I'm gonna spend, this is what I'm bringing in. And we know the spending always stays the same predominantly, but you're talking about fixing that, but where's the fix to get those, I guess, realistic numbers? Because we're talking, you know, you cut 100 million the first time, and 100 and some change this next go around, and it's got to come out of reserves. How do we get that number to be something that you can, more palatable and you can hang your hat on, rather than this oh shit thing? Sorry. Sometimes you gotta call a spade.
Yeah, no, from my perspective, being in the House and now being in the Senate, my very first 2 years, it was a Democrat trifecta. They had the House, the Senate, and the governor, and that's when revenues started dropping. And I'm not blaming the Democrat trifecta on the numbers started dropping, but I am giving Republicans a credit for getting spending cut down, eliminating all the budget tricks, and getting us back on the right road. Governor Branstad was re-elected then, back for his second set of terms, I guess I've started calling it. But since then, we've run into a situation where each year we show up and the House Republicans would be at the bottom. You know, you come up with your proposals. The governor comes out with his first, and sometimes it's a basis of a framework, sometimes it's not. But the House would come out with theirs, which would be far below the revenue estimating conference number. The Senate Democrats would come out with theirs, which would be far above the Senate, or the revenue estimating conference number. And the fix is to not spend 99% of an estimate that is not scientific or binding. I mean, it's just an estimate. I'm not even gonna blame the revenue estimating conference. It's a decent system, I believe. I think we have competent people there. But when you miss it by 1% or 2% of $7 billion, that's a big chunk of money there. The answer is to not worry so much about the 99% spending rule, which, remember, includes the carryover money from the previous year. So it's artificially higher than 99% of ongoing revenue. The answer is to get that number down to 97, 96, 95% of the revenue, and not count that ongoing. When you do that and you have ongoing carryovers, you can start doing things, one-time money for one-time things, such as our statewide interoperability system that needs one-time expenditures. But what you never end up doing is having to cut budgets because revenues come in 1 or 2% below projections. All of this comes down to, if I was simply going to say it's a revenue problem, which it's not. Remember, we talked about $7 billion from $5 billion. Agriculture is the industry that moves the state. I mean, when we had $7 corn, $6 corn, $5 corn, that was the revenue that came in that allowed the 99% rule to drag the budget up higher and higher. Now that we're at $3.50 and $3.25 cash corn out here, the revenue, it's just not meeting revenue estimates. So the answer is to go to 95%, not as a legally, but as a matter of responsible budgeting, realizing that the system is made up of humans, they are infallible. And I would point out that when people say, well, no, it takes $7 billion to run the state, there's another 7 or a little over 7 billion federal dollars that come in. So we're closer actually to $15 billion that are used to run the state of Iowa with 3.1 million people. And then on top of that, I always put my numbers together. This is my annual newsletter on state publicly held debt. We've got $15 billion in publicly held debt for school bonds, city bonds, county, public, state bonds. So, boy, folks, there's only 3 million of us here. We've got $7 billion discretionary. over $7 billion federal dollars, $15 billion in publicly held debt that is being serviced. I'm not calling that a crisis, but let's start worrying about that. We also have a pension system that's at 86, 87% IFRS, that, 86, 87% funded. And, and we're not even counting there some of the off-budget, off-general fund, the road use tax fund, which is hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, which is not a liability. That goes to our roads that but there's a lot of money in this state being used from year to year. It's not a revenue problem. We have a spending problem. Yes, sir.
I just wanna ask you, President.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry,
President Trump.
next.
Yeah, no, that's okay.
President Trump keeps going on about wanting more responsibility for programs on the states as opposed to the federal government. Isn't that gonna involve a reduction of federal funds coming into the state and put more financial burden on the state? That's the way I look at it. I just wanna know what your
Well, I know
opinion.
he's been talking about block granting, like Medicaid and things like that. We have no idea how that's gonna shake out.
There's no way to tell at this point.
I don't think so.
No, but when 40 cents on the dollar is borrowed that comes to us from the federal government, maybe more, I think it's something to worry about. Just that stream of funding.
We got enough to worry about.
In the back, I
Yes.
know you've had your hand up for a while.
Oh, thank you. I wrote it out so that I get it. The Iowa that I know and love, and I know that you know and love as well, I consider it a beautiful state. It's full of kind and generous people. I've grown up here. I went to college here. I moved away, and now I'm back here. And it breaks my heart because I feel like people on the national stage now aren't seeing Iowa the same way that we see our state because of the words of Congressman Steve King, which seem to consistently come from the white supremacist playbook. David Duke, the former imperial wizard of the KKK, certainly reads it that way. And it breaks my heart because this rhetoric drives away not only tourists, who contribute $8 billion a year to Iowa's economy, but all kinds of people who may not feel safe here because of their skin color or religion, and anyone who could be a real asset to the state but who don't want to be associated with this white supremacist ideology. We need people moving here or our state is going to die. We already have a net population loss of 5% per year of college graduates. So I just want to say, would you state clearly that you disavow Steve King's statements and that, in your view, Iowa is a welcoming place for everyone?
I'll happily say that Iowa's a welcoming place for everyone. And I'll happily say that I'm proud of all that we do here in Iowa and all that we've accomplished as a state and as a community. If you're going to ask me to sit up here and publicly disavow our congressman who's been serving us for over a decade in the U.S. House, I'm not about to do it. Thank you.
I think this is a good time to pass something out.
I think she meant disavow his statement, not disavow him. Disavow that statement.
I will. I mean, you've got this on camera and you're sending it to Des Moines, so I will stand up and say that Congressman King's statement was taken out of context for their political purposes. The far left has been after Congressman King forever. Nothing about Congressman King's statements was genetic, ethnic, or anti-anywhere. What it did say is that demographically, when a country doesn't repopulate itself, and this is just simple demographics, if a population inside a country doesn't repopulate itself, and what that means is if we don't raise our children to pledge allegiance to the flag, to go to church on Sunday, to honor the Constitution, to understand the distinct American heritage that we have, and which I believe has placed us on top of the world stage and at the top of the globe as far as successful countries, you're not going to continue to be that. You're not going to continue to be the distinct American culture that has succeeded more powerfully and more successfully than any other country in the world. So the congressman was taken out of context, and I understand what he means because I listened to his entire message.
I agree with everything that was just said. I do not agree with everything that any elected official says, but I think Congressman King has done an outstanding job of representing the values that I'm fighting for. And I'm proud to be on the list that I just passed out, which is a Progress Iowa list. Progress Iowa is a progressive far-left group here in Iowa, and it's very difficult to It's very difficult to figure out what they believe in, but if you look at their About Me page, it says, quote, Progress Iowa is a multi-issue progressive advocacy organization. Year-round, we promote progressive ideas and causes with creative earned media strategies, targeted email campaigns, and cutting-edge news media. With our allies, we work to significantly improve the communications effort of the entire progressive community in Iowa. Now, if you look at who they support and what they advocate, and if you look at the entire progressive community nationwide, or you go on and you look at what progressives advocate, I would suggest the following. They support sanctuary cities, socialized medicine, more government spending and regulation, assaulting the Second Amendment, attacking religious liberty. They're for abortion, and they're for the admission of anyone into our nation, regardless of their ability to assimilate. They also play loose with the truth, as you will see on that sheet, repeating a lie that the Iowa State Education Association has retracted regarding a statement that I never made during the collective bargaining debate. They believe in government, they believe in big government, labor union bosses, Planned Parenthood, and Black Lives Matter. Ladies and gentlemen, I will stand here before you and tell you that I believe in people, locally elected officials, a culture of life, and that all lives matter. I will continue to fight for the values that this organization seeks to destroy, and I could not be prouder of being on that list.
Amen. Linda.
Okay. I have some other agendas besides the one that we've talked about before. But I realize that I'm a little bit late to the table as far as the public employees negotiations that went on. But I was really disappointed because if you look at what Governor Branstad was really proud of, Iowa standing in the U.S. News and World Report, and the fact that Iowa was number 6 of all the states, all the 50 states. Iowa was number 6, and he was really proud of that. But I'd like to point out that one of the reasons that Iowa made it number 6 was because we were number 8 in education. My concern with what you have done is to essentially take away a lot of the desire that the teachers have, a lot of the desires of our public workers, our roads workers, our parks workers, to want to be able to be a part of this state. You have, in essence, taken away one of the vibrant areas that would attract new businesses to come in. I don't know how many businesses you talked to before you passed this legislation, but I know the businesses that I work with depended on our educational systems for their workers, to attract the kind of workers that they wanted. Did you talk to Google? Did you talk to John Deere? You know, it's kind of one of those where I'm going, it just doesn't make any sense to me that you are undercutting one of the primary attractions of our state. We have excellent education services here. They were even better before. But my concern was even that it seemed to me, by leaving in the requirement that they cannot legally strike, was petty and vindictive.
Well, I guess I disagree that it did anything to affect education. I don't believe that it did anything to affect public works. What it did was level out the playing field between the private sector and the public sector.
But you're not going to grow the economy, which is number 30.
Ma'am, I ran on and I believe to this moment that building government doesn't build economy. I don't believe that what we need to do is we need to make the experience in the private and the private and the public sector similar.
It has nothing to do with building government.
Well, I believe it does, ma'am. When you have force of law behind the public union saying you have to give us this or you have to give us this, those are unelected officials having the force of law to raise taxes and raise expenses in government. And I don't believe that government size and private sector success go hand in hand.
But what you did was you took away the negotiation from the local, from the school boards, from the local superintendents, from the local associations, and you put it in Des Moines.
I don't believe that at all, just the opposite of that. Absolutely, we removed from Des Moines the Iowa Code, the force of law. Employees and managers, whether they're at schools, that would be superintendents of school boards, they can discuss any topic, anytime, outside of collective bargaining. They can get input. We have schools who don't even have public unions in them. Schleswig's one of them. They operate just fine without force of law requiring tax dollars to be spent in a certain way. This is going to offer innovation and the opportunity for managers to do things more efficiently and use innovation. Now, with that comes responsibility. So you're gonna have some people try things that don't work as well. Other areas of government can look at that and either build on that or decide, no, that didn't work very well. But all of this is based on private sector. I was asked a couple times that haven't you always had a say in your health insurance? Folks, I showed up and asked for a job when I would apply for a job, and they would tell me, this is what we offer. Nobody gave me the force of law, Iowa code, all 6 volumes of it, to say, no, Jason wants this instead, and you have to fund it. That's not the way the real world works. We created a more level playing field that's going to benefit Iowa in the long run. I have no doubt of that, and I'm very confident in that.
So I do.
Fair enough, ma'am, and the input is accepted. I do accept.
And I disagree. I've got 2 daughters in Iowa that are teachers and a daughter in Nebraska, which doesn't count. But it's harmed my 2 daughters irreparably, say, in Iowa when you fooled around with collective bargaining.
I do accept the input, ma'am. I mean, I do.
What we really did was we took and we sort of applied private sector principles so that public sector workers will work based more on merit and job performance, just like the rest of the world does. And I don't think anybody should be afraid of that except those who are not pulling their share of the weight or not performing in an acceptable manner. My wife's a school teacher and she actually came today, so I don't know if you have anything you want to add, but I think what we did is great for education and great for Iowa.
And then next, ma'am.
A recent report came out from, I apologize, I didn't have that prepared. But I have it just recently from Respectability on the number of people with disabilities employed in the workforce. We had the whole MCO thing that happened last year. But hidden in there was a piece that IME, DHS had been working on policy around employment and changing the rules going from facility sheltered to community-based employment. Some of these statistics are a little bit older and haven't caught up with some of the great outcomes that are happening in Iowa on employment in the community. But Iowa has gone from 7th in their report to 3rd for most people with disabilities employed in the workforce. So the governor's office, DHS pushing forward with their rules, the legislature going with that should be embraced as a positive. We're seeing individuals that are working in the community that 5-10 years ago were saying they're unemployable. We're seeing when someone defines themselves, they're defining themselves as I work here or I do this. And that's great. We're seeing great things. So I continue to encourage you to support funding for those services which fall through Iowa Medicaid and as we go forward with that, because those outcomes are great. There's a lot of states, number 1, South Dakota, number 2, North Dakota. So, and Nebraska's number 4. So it's happening in the Midwest, and it's going to go through the country. So it's a great thing.
That's interesting. I appreciate you bringing that up.
It's 46.5%, by the way.
46.5%.
Percent of people with disabilities are employed in the workforce.
Oh, okay.
So you said we went to 3rd?
We went from 7th to 3rd.
How long of a time frame did we go from 7th
That
to 3rd?
was in over 1 year's time.
1 year's time.
So a lot, and that doesn't include a lot of that great movement with those rule changes that happened back on May 4th of 2016 that shifted the funding from sheltered facility-based to community-based employment, increasing the education requirements of people working with individuals trying to find employment and maintain employment. So those are positive changes that allow providers to provide those supports that really, if they provided in the past, it wasn't efficient, it wasn't being a good steward of Medicaid dollars to provide those services, and now it is.
Fair enough. Ma'am?
Me.
Yep.
Thank you. I am a public employee. I am not afraid of I have been one for this is my 30th year. I feel that you imply with your words and your tone that I am afraid of being based on my merit as a public employee. I am not. When this discussion first began, the word tweak was used. You did not tweak it. That isn't a tweak. And so please don't infer that I am afraid to be judged based on the merits of how I perform my job as a public employee. But there's a reason it's called negotiation. I have never gone into a job and been able to say this is the insurance I want either. It was negotiated. Thank you.
I did not infer anything to you directly. What I was referring to was if they're public employees who are not pulling their share of the load, perhaps they should be concerned about the new collective bargaining laws, because it does mirror more of the private sector, which is you work based upon your performance, which is how government becomes more efficient. When you work based upon performance and not just some artificial system that protects you because you've been there for 30 years, that's when we get inefficiency. And so I was not inferring anything to any individual in this room. I think that was clear from my comments.
And I guess for the crowd, the word tweak was used, but I believe the comment, I believe it was mine, I believe it was on the front page of the Des Moines Register, when I was asked, what are you considering? And I said, everything is on the table, from full repeal to small tweaks. Now, we chose a different spot. We didn't go to repeal and we didn't go to tweaks. So that is, however, that has become a talking point that I supposedly said there would only be tweaks. Well, folks, I laid out the whole spectrum, and I didn't know where we would land yet. We had, I had 7 official drafts of the bill as we worked through and looked at what would work and what was best, and there were actually 20 different rewrites. I mean, so it was a complex process, and we looked at the entire spectrum to see what would work and fit best in Iowa. So.
Sure, you got your hand up for one.
John Flunky, Reglan Precinct, Harrison County. When you use your own ears to hear Steve King say things, you don't cringe, you don't have profiles of courage times when you say that's wrong. Isn't that your duty as much as cutting taxes, doing all these things one way? Don't you have to stick up for your people everywhere, not just the billionaires and all these people? I'm from Iowa, I'm not a billionaire. How many people in here are billionaires? You know, when you hear Steve King saying things, is it your duty to stand up and say he's wrong? Because, well, yes, you can. You have your own ears, you can say it.
I was trying to be respectful of the gentleman around me, so I didn't step over.
Go ahead.
Sir, was all I was saying. I'm just guessing that by my statements when I stood up, and I think 3/4 of the room clapped when I gave my perception of what he said, I don't think that means that they expect me to apologize for what I heard him say. I get the impression that most people understand that when the statement is not taken out of context and he's actually rooting for America and not against the world, that most people nod their heads and say, yes, we got to take care of us.
My ears did hear it out of context.
I understand.
I mean, all of us heard Steve King say things that we were just embarrassed by. You're not. You're not, okay?
I'm embarrassed by what the lady in the last table said about Steve King being a white supremacist. Does she not know? The Democrats were the ones that started the Ku Klux Klan? Okay.
Donald Trump's carrying it on.
Back to the collective bargaining. Sorry. Some of the other people as being more important, but, so they retain their collective bargaining rights, and that's probably not the right way to say it. But at the end of the day, you've got your Department of Transportation people out there that are on the highways facing 40-ton trucks every day to do their job. Their job is probably more inherently riskier than a police officer per se on a daily basis. How often do police officers get a gun phrase? I know they respond to gun calls, but at the end of the day, those guys took a pretty good hit, and they're out there on the highways on a daily basis and basically lost any protection that they may have from the negotiation process. It's here's what it is, here's what you live with.
I guess I'll just accept that. We disagree, but you get the right to stand up and say it. I mean, great.
I think it was the carve-outs, and I think that's what people don't like, you know, because nobody twisted the policeman's arm to become a policeman. I know their job is to, nobody twisted the guy to go drive a truck on the DOT. But they didn't get carved out, and that just has caused a lot of angst on this collective bargaining bill, because I think it's great what you did. But I too wish, honestly, that nobody was carved out, that they were all under the same rules. I think it would have caused less angst.
I would agree with you, and the initial drafts had that. We ran into opposition, some of which would eliminate the votes that we needed to pass it. And so, I mean, literally decisions were made. But the initial drafts did not have.
It was the beginning, maybe you can do the rest another year. I mean, at least to get your foot in the door.
It could be, we will have to see what the I hate this phrase, but the will of the legislators who were in office at the time that the question was asked. I don't myself as the floor manager of the bill, I don't have future plans on it. Right now I want to see what we have. It's not a future, I guess I didn't pass what I considered an unworkable issue. I want to see it happen, I want to see it work, and so I wasn't coming back with a plan that next year's gonna be another round. I'll take a look at it though, and I am listening, so thank you.
Ma'am, you've had your hand up for a while.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of shift gears a little bit. I don't really understand, so that's why I'm asking about it. I had read something this last week about bailing out the Medicaid companies that because we privatized it, and then we had these 3 companies that was taking care of managing the system, or however you want to say it, and there's multi-million-dollar shortfalls. They had huge losses, and you come in telling us about how tight the budget is, my question is twofold. First of all, if we're paying these millions of dollars, did we save money? Did the taxpayers actually save money by privatizing Medicaid? And I work 2 jobs. I work at the school, I'm a teacher, and I also work for Crossroads of Western Iowa. So I seen at Crossroads the extra documentation, the fear of not getting paid for services that we're doing, and is the state even saving money when we have to pick up these losses? And second of all, how are we paying these losses when we have money that we're dipping into our reserves?
We talked about this.
That's part of what we've been addressing up here when I said that we have liabilities we have to fund in Medicaid. We have to make those decisions because we have to make sure that those people that need those services are getting those services paid for. As far as the amount of money that the state may have saved or is saving, I don't have an exact number for you right here today. It's been a bumpy road. I mean, I'll be one of many legislators that will say it. I mean, it's not been a perfect transition, and I wish it would have gone a lot smoother. And there are still things that we are trying to work through in order to address the concerns and the problems that are out there. But we are still moving forward, providing the services that Iowans need, that they depend upon, and we're going to continue to do that. That's one of the biggest obligations that we have. So, I mean, that's the best way I can answer it.
I would just say, maybe the same time you read it, it came across my phone yesterday that an article had broken in the Des Moines Register that perhaps the Department of Health and Human Services had committed to making up some shortfalls. I probably found out about that when you did. I know no more information about it than you do, but I look forward to asking a lot of questions as to what that entails when I get back to Des Moines. Because, and I would echo what Representative Windschitl said, I will not sit here and defend a lot of aspects of managed care. I'm extremely unhappy with a lot of things that are going on in managed care. I'm unhappy that my hospital in Crawford County is owed over $1 million right now. I'm unhappy that my optometrist in Denison is not getting paid properly. I'm unhappy that my home care medical equipment company in Denison is having to fight to get their payments. This is not the way this was portrayed to us as going when it was done. And bear in mind, the legislature had no input on this. This was done by the governor. And something had to be done. There was no doubt about that. We were on a cost trajectory that could not be sustainable. But this is not going the way I would like to have seen it go. And there's a lot of challenges that we need to address. And we will continue to work to do that.
It's a front page register story today that the taxpayers of Iowa are going to bail out the MCOs to the tune, I think, of $45 million, maybe, or 400. I don't know what the dollar amount is. It's unbelievable.
Well, not Not to rag on the Des Moines Register, but check your source.
Yeah, I know, I read between those lines.
Yeah.
Yes,
I understand, okay, first of all, I don't believe there's any billionaires in the room, and so I understand that the state has a budget, and a budget is fact of life, and so I have mixed feelings about this voter ID law that just happened, and so I'm assuming that's another expense to the state now, right? Because it's gonna cost more money, we have to train people to understand when you go to vote, you know, and then we have to provide these IDs for people now, right? Because everybody has to have an ID to vote, so these are gonna have to be provided for people that don't have them. I'm just thinking about my mom, she stopped driving many years before she passed away, and she did not have an ID, although she continued to vote, and so once that driver's license expired, she really didn't have anything other than her social security card, which I doubt is gonna be an approved ID to vote. But she continued to vote, and so the state is gonna have to provide something for people like my mom. And so that's gonna be more of an expense, and yet at the same time, I didn't hear about any voter fraud in Iowa in the last election. And so, are we adding an expense at the time that we've got a shortfall in the budget? I mean,
First of all, the bill doesn't, what is in the bill doesn't get fully implemented until 2019, okay? So it's not an immediate situation, and we do have voter fraud in Iowa. There were 96 individuals a couple years ago. You know, when somebody goes to go on jury duty, they can put that they're not a citizen, and then they don't get to serve on jury duty because they're not a citizen. Well, lo and behold, there were 96 individuals when a cross-check was done, and this was just in one area. There were 96 individuals who had checked the box that they were not citizens, that they had voted, they were on the voter rolls and had voted in the last election.
because they wanted to get out of jury duty?
No, when they further checked that, some of them were what you just described, and then a large number of them, I think more than half, were removed because they were identified as not citizens who had voted. So there is some voter fraud in Iowa. We don't really know how much voter fraud we have in Iowa or anywhere in the United States because we don't have the system and checks and balances in place to know whether we do or not. One of the things this bill will require is an after the fact report after every election that will try to identify some of these things. It does have a physical note. It's very small. I can't remember. It was something around, was it $70,000 or something like $70,000 or something like that. But this is 2019 until this is fully implemented. So it's nothing that's going to happen in the next year or so.
Okay, it's 11 o'clock. You guys want to take another question or two and then wrap it up, or we have
If there's questions out there.
Otherwise, you can just hang out for individual questions. Oh, good.
Oh,
Do we have a new governor?
Not yet.
Are we missing a governor?
Not yet. No, they're still alive and well and doing their jobs. I was down there talking with them Thursday. They're both at the Capitol working. Okay.
Two people? The governor being one person?
What he's implying is, has Governor Branstad left to be ambassador to China yet? And Lieutenant Governor Reynolds is typically right by the governor's side at most events and during most negotiations or discussions.
The day part.
Yes, sir.
Stand your ground.
Yes.
I saw a little bit about it, but is it done?
I wouldn't say it's a done deal yet. The Senate still has it under consideration, but we moved the firearms omnibus bill through the House. That's one of the things that I was alluding to in my opening statement. Look, I wish we could have gone further with a lot of things, but I think the bill we have before us, with the protections that the stand your ground language will provide, is an absolutely monumental step forward from where we're at. And it removes the duty to retreat, provides civil and criminal immunity for someone who is justified in use of reasonable force. It enhances the Castle Doctrine. I mean, it is light years beyond where we're currently at in recognizing Iowa's rights. So I believe the Senate will take that up next week. I've been having constant discussions with the floor manager over there, and I believe we will put that down on the governor's desk and do the Senate.
In the Senate, behind the scenes, we are all in agreement. We want an omnibus gun bill to pass, and I'm part of the group. When I hear somebody talk about an amendment here or there, saying absolutely not, let's run this through, let's get it to the governor. I'm looking forward to the debate where we listen for a few hours about this isn't fair to the people who are attacking others. Because remember, on Stand Your Ground, we're not talking somebody walking down the street minding their own business getting shot by a gun owner who says stand your ground. We're talking somebody who's attacking the individual who gets a legal defense now. And I just don't understand why we're worried about muggers and rapists and criminals. Folks, let's let citizens be citizens, stand up and defend themselves.
And there's a lot of misconceptions out there that this is somehow shoot first and ask questions
Yeah.
later, or that this is vigilante justice where you're chasing down the criminal. I wrote this bill. I've been writing this bill since my first year in office in 2007. I filed it all the way back then, 11 years ago. This is not shoot first, ask questions later. This is not vigilante justice. This is you as an individual citizen. If you ever find yourself in that untenable situation where someone is going to attack you or attack someone around you or a loved one, being able to make a decision that you are going to stand your ground and meet force with force if it is reasonable to do so. It removes the duty to retreat. Iowa law right now says that if you are out in the general public, you're walking down the sidewalk, and someone is coming at you, you have to first try and run away. And if you don't, and you use force against that attacker, that aggressor, when it goes to trial, the jury will be told in the jury instructions that they had to try and run away first. And if you didn't, they can find you guilty of self-defense, that you should not have used self-defense. We remove that, and we make it very clear that if you are not engaged in criminal activity, you have no duty to retreat. And I wrote it specifically so the folks that had concerns about gang violence, gangs using this as their own defense. If they're engaged in illegal activity, they can't have a stand your ground defense. But the average law-abiding citizen, the folks in this room, if you choose to stand your ground, you have legal protection to do so. It's as simple as that. Sir?
I was in Des Moines and I watched you take the bill through the House. I was over and watched Senator Zahn and Senator Dawson take it through the judiciary. I just want to say thanks. That's all I want to say.
Thank you for coming to the Capitol.
You done with the question?
Yeah, I think we'll wrap this up now if
Okay,
you want to.
I got a couple items.
Okay, here you go.
Been involved with Kiwanis Club, doing these legislative coffees for a number of years. And I just wanted to point out that Logan is celebrating his sesquicentennial this year, 150 years. There'll be activities throughout the year, a lot of activity after the 4th of July, and we invite you to come and participate. I was cleaning out a desk drawer yesterday. Now, it's going to tell you how long it's been since I cleaned that drawer out. I just thought it'd be kind of interesting, especially for some of you that are near my age, as to who some of the people I've worked with over the years that have been setting up